I'm not really sure how to start this off, but let me tell you, I am not just being paranoid as I'm writing this. I am genuinely scared for my life and I have nowhere else to go. About a week ago, I came across a forum online that was talking about the deep web. Having already known about the deep web from a few friends at school, I knew that I should check it out. After a lot of searching on how to access it, I finally had everything set up. I was excited. This was all new to me and I love finding new things. A buddy of mine suggested I check out the Hidden Wiki to find a bunch of stuff that would be interesting. He told me that there are things I should be wary about whilst browsing the deep web, but most of those things I shouldn't have to worry about because they're paid services. I brushed him off, but I knew he was over-exaggerating. I opened Tor and I made sure to turn off all the necessary scripts, not wanting to be tracked. I was seriously into finding some leaked documents about Area 51 and Gitmo, basically anything that exposed the government. As I was browsing, I came across this archive with over 3,000 links on it. I decided I would start somewhere near the bottom. I clicked on quite a few and waited them to load while looking for more to open. Let it be noted that not all of them had descriptions or titles. It was just the links that were shown, and in retrospect, I shouldn't have clicked on those ones. Eventually, all of the tabs loaded and I started to go through them. One was some kind of forum where deep web surfers could interact with each other and find out where some other cool websites are. I was interested in that, so I left that tab open and went on to the next one. This one was just a page that had been seized by the government. I immediately closed that tab. That was me being paranoid. Deep inside I knew that my IP address was hidden and I was protected by a bunch of firewalls and security software that I had bought for my previous job. The next tab was disturbing, to say the least. Now, I won't go into detail because I don't want to put too vivid of an image into your brain. Let's just say it was snuff. Snuff that should never, under any circumstances, be seen by anyone. I immediately closed that tab and was left to the same forum that I had first come across. After a run with the last website, I should have left. I should have kept going. I shouldn't have kept going, but my curiosity got the best of me and I kept going in deeper and deeper with every single click. Eventually, I came across a website that I was hoping I'd find. Government exploits. I was so relieved that I wouldn't be coming across any more snuff or stuff that I wouldn't see ever again. For those of you who browse the deep web, you should know what I was talking about. I casually was browsing through this amazing website when I saw another tab pop open. It startled me, as I hadn't clicked anything and I was just reading. I slowly hovered the tab and considered closing it, but before I could make up my mind, I opened the tab. The worst mistake I have ever made. At first, it looked innocent enough. It was just a blank page. Kind of like the page you get when there's a 404 error, except there was nothing on it. I thought of it and I was about to close the page when words started forming on the page without me typing. Hello, the first word read. Nice to see you again. Again, I questioned myself. Shit, I knew I should have reset my IP address after accessing some of the websites I did. You don't look like I expected you to. All of the color drained from my face. How did this person know what I looked like? I thought for sure this was some kind of bot that the webpage owner had made to fuck with newcomers to the deep web and started laughing. I then continued to exit the page, only it wouldn't let me. That's when I started to panic. Not a huge panic, more like the kind of panic you get when you think you've forgotten or lost your wallet somehow. Trying to leave so soon. Lynn? Now I was full on panicking. There was no way in hell this guy could know my name. The next message he sent was bone-chilling. He sent my full name, my social security number, my address, phone number, previous employers, and every little bit of personal information he could dig up on me. I was terrified. Now that I have your attention, be a good girl and look at the camera for me. I did, and I mentally slapped myself. How could I have forgotten to tape my webcam before going on the deep web? I figured he had access to my microphone, so I asked him a question. What do you want? I asked. Not so fast, he replied. You look so beautiful. I'd love for you to make an appearance in one of my videos. I shook my head and said no. Oh, but I'm not giving you a choice, he said. I started crying. I knew he wasn't giving me a choice, and I tried to remain emotionless to keep from getting this guy off knowing that he was able to get something out of me. But obviously I failed. He had all of my information and I was hopeless. I was dead either way. I was done reading what this guy had to say and I threw my laptop outside into the rain, locked all of the doors and windows and went into my room. I'd buy a laptop the next day, I told myself. Just as I started to drift off to sleep, I heard tapping at my window. It wasn't loud enough for me to get out of my half-sleeping trance, but then there was a loud bang. I jumped from my bed and slowly walked over to my bedroom window, and there was nothing there. I got back into my bed and started to fall asleep again, and I slept through the night, waking up at 6 a.m. this morning. I've been getting calls all day from a blocked number. I know it's long distance because my phone has a different ring to it as if it's a long distance caller. This is how I avoid accidentally answering the phone to telemarketers. Seeing how it was a blocked number, I figured it could be family calling from my hometown. So I answered, and all I could hear on the other line was a heavy breathing. Every hour on the hour I've been getting phone calls like this all day. It is now 9:30 p.m. as I'm writing this, and I'm absolutely scared shitless. I don't know what to do since this guy knows all of my information, and being in the panic that I was last night, I ruined all the evidence that I had of the conversation between him and myself. The police aren't doing anything because he hasn't made any direct threats. I'm genuinely scared for my life. I sincerely hope I can get as many people as I can to read this. Maybe, just maybe, if enough people read this, you can protect yourselves. It's too late for me. People can be so dumb sometimes, so ignorant. We take so much of our world for granted. We take and use things, and we don't even know how they work or how dangerous they really are. It's like electricity. So many of us quite literally would fall apart without using it every single second of every single day. But if we aren't careful, the same thing that seemingly gives us life is the exact thing that could end it. Touching an exposed wire, or spilling our coffee, or something as simple as pulling the plug out of the socket the wrong way could end your life. I was, or should say I am, a fucking nerd. I'm not offended by the term, in fact. In many ways, I'm quite proud of it. People think you're smart, that you can do all sorts of things. If only I were smart. Maybe I could have avoided this, but the truth is I couldn't have known any better. Why don't I just skip the theatrics and tell you what happened? I got hacked. I must have deserved it, right? Some dumb kid who went into the dark web and messed with the wrong guy. But that's not really what happened. I was innocent, you see. I bought my laptop from a perfectly good retailer with the money I earned over the summer from college. I was so excited when I got it. I planned weeks ahead. I scoured the aisles for the perfect computer. There were all sorts of models, and eventually I found the one that was absolutely perfect. It was a blue HP laptop with 8GB RAM, a quad-core processor, a NVIDIA GTX 980M, a 30TB hard drive, a built-in webcam capable of 17 megapixels, and a sexy, sleek, smooth blue covering. Talk about nerdgasm-inducing machine. Of course I bought it, and let me tell you, nothing was wrong with the thing. The hack wasn't pre-installed or anything like that, so neither the manufacturer or store was to blame. I'll tell you why I know this later. I was absolutely infatuated with this marvelous machine, and the second I got to my house, I isolated myself in my room and assembled the beautiful thing. I hooked it up to charge, started up everything, got my account all ready, and connected to the Wi-Fi. Before I knew it, I had transferred all of my previous downloads from my old dinosaur of a computer into the new one. All of my apps, icons, and logos were moved, all backed by the power of the damn fine piece of silicone and metal. I started my internet browser and started to surf the web. You might be thinking this must have been where the hack came from, clearly. Perhaps I had accidentally encountered a virus at a porn site or something, but that wasn't it. The only sites I'd visited were places like Facebook and Twitter. And even if I had been on a porn site, the chances of getting a virus on there are less than that of a church organization site. If you don't believe me, look it up. Anyways, I was searching the web when my security installment McAfee went off. A maroon pop-up came up on my screen displaying the message, "Your firewall is down. Do you authorize this, or do you wish to activate it again?" I knew that McAfee had come from my old computer, which had files that were from the deep web and from certain internet websites, but I didn't think about this at the time. I found it odd, but then again it was a program trying to help me out. It didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. After all, I could just run a virus scan and find out if the program was faulty. I told you, I'm a nerd. I know my shit. I decided better safe than sorry and clicked on the enable button on the bottom of the pop-up. I didn't want any viruses being able to affect my computer, and that was that. Within a few seconds, the firewall was enabled and I exited the pop-up. I continued to surf the web and laugh at cat videos, all the usual stuff people do on the internet. After a couple of hours, my eyes had grown tired and I decided to call it a night. I turned off my computer and headed to bed. The weirdest didn't start for several days. It wasn't anything huge at first, just little things like an added each some of the names of the files I kept in my hard drive, or a window would close right as I'd opened it for no reason. I just passed them off as little bugs or mistakes. Perhaps I had been tired when I typed the name of the file, and the sudden closing might have been due to the browser malfunctioning. Then one night, I was surfing Facebook when I got a message from my mom. The dialog box came up and I clicked on it to see what she had to say. This is an outline of the conversation I had with her. Hey, honey. Oh, hey, Mom. What's up? Need anything? No, I just miss you. That's all. Well, we live in the same house. Why don't you just come into my room and say hi? Oh, no, honey. I can't do that. Why not? I can't see you. Can you move a little closer? What? What are you talking about? I want to see your face, honey. At this point, I was really weirded out. I brushed it off. Maybe she had been drinking again. Mom, what are you talking about? You're in the next room. Just come in if you want to see me. You want me to come over? Yes, just stop and come into my room. Okay, I will. I sat there at the computer, looking at the door, expecting her to come in any second to drunkenly kiss me on the cheeks and tell me how much she loved me, as was customary. I know, I'm a nerd. As I waited, the time stretched on. I grew restless and looked around. I looked at the crack between my door and the floor and noticed it was dark. How late was it? I turned my head and checked my alarm clock. 3:35 a.m. Was my mom even awake at this hour? I went to my door and walked into the hallway and stretched my head out to the hallway to see if there were any lights or noise that would indicate my mom was awake. The house was silent and pitch black with only the little LED lights of the kitchen and fire alarms to give light. I could hear in the distance, very faintly, the rough choking noises of my mother and father snoring downstairs. I had a really uneasy feeling in the pit of my stomach. I turned around and went back into my room. I sat down at my desk and spun to face my screen in my office chair. My notifications had blown up. There were 300 plus notifications on my feed. I clicked on the blue world logo and checked it out. My mom had liked every single one of my posts, pictures, and comments. Every single one. Even ones from 6 years ago. I immediately knew it had to be a hack. I decided there was nothing I could do about it from my vantage point, so I just warned my mom about it tomorrow and tell her to change her password. I clicked out the Windows logo far left bottom of my corner of my desktop and selected shut down to turn off my computer. It didn't work. It simply exited out after I clicked and the computer stayed on the desktop and didn't charge. I was irritated at this point. Clearly, this hacker was a little more talented than I thought. I pulled up command prompt and began to browse through my computer's files. I was trying to find out where the breach had come from, but the black code box froze up. Without me touching the keyboard, I watched as the screen lit up with letters. Text box read, "Hello, son." I was seriously freaked out at this point. I pressed Ctrl-Alt-Delete trying to shut the computer down, but a pop-up came up and said, a program like Skype had been turned on. The only difference was that every line, letter, border was a bright green on a black background, all in a really pixelated 8-bit format. It had a small dialog box similar to that kind that you see on chat roulette. The screen where someone's face would be black. I could see my face in the bottom screen, gently illuminated by green light. I looked scared shitless. I desperately tried to gain control of my computer. The keyboard was utterly frozen, and no matter how many times I pushed the power button, my laptop refused to turn off. My breath caught in my throat as I saw a masked figure appear on the screen, his appearance illuminated by the light of his screen. He had a red devil mask on, a silver hoodie, and black gloves. He laughed and typed, "Seeing your faggot face get scared is fucking priceless." I was offended by the rude comment and this hacker's ridiculous attitude. I flipped in the bird and angrily shouted, "Hey, fuck you, you prick." He sat with his hands folded over his stomach and he laughed. His mask was smiling, and his evil little red smile, it shone like it had been in a fresh coat of wax. He then started to type again. "I wouldn't be saying that if I were you. I know where you live." Could he really know where I lived? I shakily exhaled and said, "How do you know where I live?" I watched the screen as the man in the hood lifted his head up and tapped his chin as if he were in thought. He scratched his head and he typed again. As he typed every digit, he only used his index finger and tauntingly pushed each key slowly, lifting his finger like he was a composer. He sent my router's IP address. I glanced from the numbers back to the screen where he was. He had put his hands behind his head and kicked his feet up as if he were relaxing. Suddenly, it put a hand in front of him, holding out one index finger indicating he had one more thing to type. He put his feet back on the floor and typed quickly. Your address is 1567 S. Mulberry Street, Topeka, Kansas. We all gotta die sometime, and I have to make money." He then reached underneath of what I assumed was his desk and pulled out a giant surgical knife and a red cooler. He typed something for the last time. "I'll see you soon, honey." The color drained from my face. That had been my exact address. I watched as he got up from his seat and left his chair. He wasn't getting near my family. I pulled the plug from my laptop's charging port. My laptop still didn't turn off, though the screen only got slightly less bright. I furiously slammed my fingers across the keys, trying to make the computer react. It still wasn't reacting, and the power button was useless. I kicked my laptop off the desk and started to smash it against my knee. It eventually broke and stopped working. The screen displayed a rainbow of colors and the computer finally shut down. I didn't care about it. I had to wake my parents and let them know what was going on. I had to call the police. I rushed downstairs and turned on the lights and find the phone. The lights were out. I flipped the switch several times, but to no avail. They were all out. I frantically fell in the dark for the desk where we kept our family phone. I tipped over our coffee table and hit my head against the little lap stand we had it on. My head filled with a sharp pain, but I tried to ignore it. I heard a clutter of plastic next to me and thought it might have been the phone. I grabbed for it while simultaneously rubbing my head. It was the phone. I raised it to my face and dialed 911. Fuck, the phone was out of reception. I got up on my feet and tried to find my parents. I felt around to their hall and I found the door wide open. I stopped at the doorway. What I'd found had been in my nightmares for weeks. They were under the covers. Their heads were underneath the blankets, so I couldn't see their expressions. I entered the room and went over the side of the bed. And I shook my mother's shoulders. Mom, I shouted. I shook her some more and threw off the covers. Mom, you need to get up. I fucked up real. I froze in shock at what I beheld. My mother laid there, her eyes wide open, looking out at the darkness. Her throat had been slashed open, and blood was literally everywhere. She was utterly naked. Her breast had been cut off, and she had her entrails removed. My father fared no better. His body had been forced on its stomach, and he had a long, bloody cut down his back. His neck was twisted, so he perfectly faced towards me. His eyes and nose had been cut off, making his face look like a bloody skeleton skull. He, too, had had his throat utterly flayed open. So, that was it. That's what I had heard when I poked my head out. They hadn't been snoring. They had been choking on their own blood. My eyes filled with tears. I covered my mouth in order to keep from screaming. And that's when I heard my room door being slammed open upstairs. Bam! I turned my head fast and looked around the room. The room was utterly dark except for a gentle blue light. In the corner of the room, there was a glow of a computer screen. On my desk, the cooler and a large surgical knife. The hacker. He had used my parents' computer to get into my mother's Facebook account. He had been in my house all along. I heard heavy footsteps coming down the stairs fast. I booked out the hall and out of my parents' room and ran into my kitchen. I found the place gently illuminated, eerily blue morning light. I ran to the back door and ran out to my neighbor's house. It took a while, but my neighbors answered the door. They were angry that someone was at their door frantically banging at 5 a.m, but when I told them the story, they immediately let me in and called the cops. The investigation was short. What had happened was a deep web hacker had been able to fake a program to infiltrate my home network, had been able to send a pop-up to my computer that looked just like McAfee, the security software. When I got in the firewall message and clicked enable, what I had actually done was allow him full access to my Wi-Fi network. He found out all of our passwords, our IP address, where we lived, what we liked, what pages we visited, what pictures we stored in our files. He was able to manipulate everything and anything he wanted to. He even had access to our power grid through our thermostat. He had been able to track our IPs and had gotten our location. A couple of days later, he had snuck into my parents' room through the window while they were asleep, and he killed them. According to the police, he had been an organ trafficker for the black market. He'd stolen my parents' kidneys, guts, pancreas, and more. I was lucky to be alive. As for what happened to the guy who did this, he was never found. He must have snuck out when my neighbors called the cops. They have no idea where he is. He's still out there to this day. Forgive me if this seems hastily written. My hands are shaking, and I'm using my phone to post. Okay, so lately I've been into the darker side of the internet, No, not really anything like the child porn boards on the deep web or anything quite like that. I've just been skulking around the creepypasta wiki and no sleep and other similar things. Perhaps because of this, you could say I've become a little more aware of my surroundings, or as you might say, just plain paranoid. Now I have to preface this by saying I'm under 18 and I'm totally dependent. I mean, I just got my driver's license for fuck's sake, and if I wasn't stressed already with my parents breaking down my neck to up my SAT score to a 2400 and the shit ton of clubs and social circles I hang around, well then this fucker certainly. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, like I said, I've been pretty paranoid lately, and because of this I've noticed something. We have this certain neighbor on our street who's old and pretty demented, in his 60s or 70s at least, and he likes to wander up and down the street. Not just on the sidewalks either, but in the middle of the goddamn road. I mean, our street isn't exactly busy, but I can't count the number of times I've almost hit this old fucker with backing out of the driveway. Anyways, I was walking our dog around 11ish at night 5 days ago when he comes up to me. First thing I have to say is that he's absolutely wasted. Drunk out of his fucking mind. The only reason I couldn't see him coming was because I was turning a corner on the sidewalk. Second thing I have to say is, unlike his usual blank expression, he's got this pissed expression on his face, like he's glaring down at me, like I just killed a puppy in front of him or something. Third thing I have to say is that when he opens his mouth to talk to me, he speaks perfectly clearly. No trace of a slur in his voice, addressing me by my fucking name, my full legal name, and blatantly telling me that he's killed girls like me. Lots of girls like me. Naturally, I back up a little, confused and nervous. I'm wondering in the back of my mind how he knows my entire name, but I'm more worried about the not-so-subtle threat. I mean, yeah, he's old, but the guy's big. 6 feet tall, 170 pounds at least, and here I am, barely scratching 5'7" and maybe 100 pounds, soaking wet with a brick tied to my feet. So I'm backing up and my dog looks up from sniffing the corner of the house I've just rounded and starts to notice the atmosphere. I decided to break the silence by saying something I really, really wish I hadn't said. Hey look, I don't know who you are, but my mom's a cop, so if you could kindly screw off, I kinda wanna go home. She's retired actually, and her old jurisdiction was in fucking Michigan, but fuck it, I'm scared. The guy gets pissed now. He grabs me by the wrist and bends it in the direction it's not supposed to go, flooring me. I wish I could say I did something smart, like kicking him in the balls or biting his ankle or something, but no. I just laid there on the ground, squirming as he pressed my arm behind my back in a half Nelson. At this point, my dog sensed that I needed help and bit the guy on the arm that was holding me, making me let go. I bolted, ran down the street, turned the corner onto my street, and ran up to my house. Turned the key so hard I'm sure it broke the lock and slammed the door behind me. I haven't seen my dog since then. My parents put up a lost dog poster with our phone number. I'm almost completely sure I'll never see her again. Now that alone shook me up pretty bad. I didn't tell my parents, figured they'd dismiss it as a lie or to explain where the dog had gone when I'd really just lost her or something. But what's scaring me is that in the past 4 days, I've seen our neighbor around in places he shouldn't be. Downtown, across the street from my gym I work at, sitting in a parking lot with a pickup truck near my school, standing on street corners where I hang out with my friends, and most unnervingly, on campus at Penn State, 50 miles away where we were visiting my sister for the weekend. Worst of all, I've been looking out my window at night, and each night I see him on the street, looking up at a different house, as if expecting someone to look back. I don't think he knows where I live, but my bedroom window faces the street, and when I sit up from bed, my head is visible from the street level. He's 2 houses away now, 2 nights away. My parents are gone visiting my grandparents in Michigan for the next week for Thanksgiving. I've called the cops already. They blew me off, told me they'd send someone, and never came. That was 3 hours ago. I know my parents keep a gun in the house. Ammo too. Self-defense and whatnot. They keep them separate, I think, and wherever they are, they're probably locked up tight. So now, I've got 44 hours to find where they hid them and learn to pick a lock. 44 hours, 14 of which I'll be at school, 2 of which I'll be at track practice. That leaves 28 hours. Somehow, I'm not hopeful about my situation. I called the police around 9. I had plenty of time in 5 hours to read replies and work myself into a crying, sobbing, panicking mess to the point I almost couldn't tell them what was happening. I described the man, old, 60s, 70s, stalking me, and the first thing the operator told me was to find a weapon in the safest room in my house and lock the door. I did. I only came out when I heard the police sirens and people shouting. I opened my front door, and there were at least 5 police cars on my street around his house, and 10 policemen were standing there, pointing their guns and screaming for him to come out with his hands up. I walked up to one and asked him if he'd come in response to my call, and he turned towards me and asked who I was. So I said yes, and he immediately started to ask if I was okay. Was I injured? I lost it. I completely fucking lost it. I collapsed there in the middle of the street in my pajamas, screaming and crying like a baby. I don't know why I broke down. I think the realization that I was safe hit me, and it sort of ruined any sorts of resolve I had built up. By the time I managed to get myself together, the officer had managed to relocate me to the side of the street. I asked him how I moved, and he told me that he had carried me. I let out an "oh" and looked across the street. 2 black trucks marked FBI were parked maybe 20 feet away, and 30 men in combat armor like the type you'd see on a riot police were holding rifles and were surrounding the house. They had a gun on every window, both doors. I heard them count down by 3, and then they bashed the doors in. I don't want to know what they saw in there. I don't. I really, really, really don't. A small part of me wonders, but anything that can make a grown man come out, throw up, then promptly start screaming his head off about how he could not go back in there completely destroys any and all sick curiosity that I might have. They dragged him out. I think he was unconscious, maybe dead. I heard screaming and a few gunshots, but I didn't see any wounds. You know what? Fuck it. I won't lie. I didn't even attempt to look at him. I couldn't without risking losing it all over again. I'm sitting here, waiting to give a statement with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders with 3 policemen in the room, and I still don't feel safe. I don't think I ever will. They called my parents, who are driving way back here now. They also called my sister. She should be here in about an hour. One of the SWAT team came up to the policeman with me a few minutes ago. They talked quietly, and I know they were trying to keep me from hearing, but fucking hell, I have sensitive ears, so. I heard the policeman ask, "How many?" 14 at least, the SWAT said back. I won't ask, and I will never know what 14 at least was referring to. I wonder if he got my information from these websites I was scrolling through. I'm not sure, but it's my only guess.